When Carter Voss mocked Renee Dawson at Wilson's Auto Shop, "You can't do a man's job with those hands," he saw only what she wanted the world to see, a reserved black mechanic who kept to herself. He couldn't see the NASA plaques hidden in her apartment or recognize the calculating precision in her eyes as she accepted his impossible engine challenge. The cameras rolling behind him captured his smug confidence, not the slight tremor in Renee's hands as she touched technology eerily similar to the classified propulsion system she'd abandoned 7 years ago after the accident that left her fiancé comatose. The other mechanics placed bets on her failure, unaware that Commander Dawson's return to engineering wouldn't just humiliate a prejudiced CEO. It would awaken a brilliance that had been deliberately buried, forcing Renee to choose between continued invisibility and a redemption that might finally heal her deepest wounds. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The smell of motor oil and the soft hum of machinery filled the air at Wilson's Auto Shop. Located in the heart of a working-class neighborhood in Detroit, the garage had been serving locals for decades. Among the grease-stained concrete floors and well-worn tools, Renee Dawson worked with quiet precision on a vintage Mustang engine. At 38, Renee wasn't what most people expected when they thought of an auto mechanic. Her dark skin was mostly free of the tattoos that adorned many of her colleagues' arms, and her braided hair was always neatly tucked under a faded blue bandana. While the other mechanics chatted loudly and played classic rock over portable speakers, Renee worked in near silence, her movements efficient and deliberate. "Hey, Renee, can you take a look at this?" called Frank Miller, a heavy-set mechanic, with 20 years at Wilson's. "I can't figure out why this timing belt keeps slipping." Without a word, Renee wiped her hands on a rag and moved to Frank's workstation. She studied the engine for less than 30 seconds before pointing to a nearly invisible crack in the tensioner. "There's your problem," she said, her voice soft but confident. "Replace that, and it'll run smooth." Frank squinted at where she pointed, then whistled. "Damn, girl. How'd you spot that so fast?" Renee just shrugged and returned to her station. She didn't need to explain that to her. Engines spoke a language as clear as English. Every ping, every vibration, every smell told a story about what was happening beneath the hood. The radio suddenly cut off, and the shop fell unnaturally quiet. Renee looked up to see Luis Alvarez, her only real friend at the garage, gesturing toward the entrance. "Heads up," Luis whispered as he passed by her station. "The new boss is here." Through the open bay doors walked a procession that looked wildly out of place in the gritty garage. Leading the pack was a tall, white man in his mid-40s wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Renee's monthly rent. His blonde hair was perfectly styled, and his smile seemed practiced for television. Behind him trailed 3 people with cameras and tablets, frantically taking notes and photos. "Good morning, everyone," the man's voice boomed with the artificial enthusiasm of a game show host. "I'm Carter Voss, your new CEO." The mechanics exchanged glances. Wilson's Auto Shop had been a family-owned business until 3 months ago when it was acquired by Auto Future, a national chain promising to revolutionize vehicle maintenance. Now they were facing the architect of that revolution. "I'm here to give you all some exciting news," Carter continued, walking through the garage, as if he owned the place, which technically he did. Auto Future is about to launch the most ambitious modernization program in automotive history. We're talking AI diagnostics, automated repair systems, and digital customer experiences that will change the industry forever. He stopped at the center of the shop floor, his shiny leather shoes a stark contrast to the oil-stained concrete. "I want to see firsthand how our shops operate before we begin the transformation. Think of me as an observer today. Just pretend I'm not here." That would be impossible, Renee thought, as Carter began walking around, examining tools and asking questions that revealed his complete lack of practical mechanical knowledge. Eventually, he made his way to Renee's station. She was deep in concentration, carefully reassembling the vintage engine's carburetor. "And what are we working on here?" Carter asked, leaning too close for comfort. "Rebuilding a 1967 Mustang 390 V8, Renee replied without looking up. Carter nodded as if he understood. "Ah, right. The V6 model. V8. Renee corrected automatically. The 390 cubic inch was never offered as a V6. Carter's smile flickered for just a moment. Of course, that's what I meant. He turned to his entourage. Get some shots of this interesting project. One of the photographers stepped forward, aiming his camera at Renee's hands as they delicately adjusted a tiny spring. Are you training here? Carter asked Renee. She finally looked up, her dark eyes meeting his. I've been a mechanic for 15 years. I'm the senior specialist for classic restorations. Carter's eyebrows rose slightly. Really? That's unexpected. He glanced at her hands again. Those don't look like a mechanic's hands. They do the job, Renee said simply. Well, Carter chuckled, looking back at his PR team. You can't do a man's job with those hands. The garage fell silent. Luis, who was working nearby, straightened up and glared at Carter. Even the photographers looked uncomfortable. Renee didn't respond immediately. Her expression remained neutral, but something flashed behind her eyes. A momentary fire quickly contained. She set down her tools with deliberate care. Is there something else you needed, Mr. Voss? She asked, her voice calm but edged with steel. Before Carter could answer, the sound of a truck backing up to the garage entrance caught everyone's attention. A flatbed truck was delivering what appeared to be an engine, but unlike any standard automobile engine, it was sleek with unusual components and a design that looked more aerospace than automotive. Ah, perfect timing. Carter clapped his hands together. Everyone gather around, this is something special. The mechanics reluctantly assembled near the truck as workers unloaded the engine onto a rolling platform. It was about the size of a standard V8, but with a completely different configuration. More compact, with titanium components and what looked like specialized cooling systems. This, Carter announced proudly, is the ARX-7 prototype. It was developed by my R&D team for experimental aviation applications, but we've had technical difficulties. None of my engineers have been able to get it running properly. He swept his arm toward the engine dramatically. I'm offering a challenge to Wilson's finest mechanics. Fix this engine, get it running to specifications, and I'll award the successful team a promotion and a 6-month pay raise. The mechanics murmured among themselves, examining the strange engine with a mixture of interest and skepticism. How long do we have? Asked Frank. 72 hours, Carter replied. His eyes drifted to Renee, and a small, smug smile crossed his face. Let's see if the lady mechanic can make it sing. Luis stepped forward. That's not, I'll do it, Renee interrupted quietly. All eyes turned to her. Carter's smile widened. Wonderful. The clock starts now. He turned to his PR team. Make sure you document this. It'll make a great story for our company newsletter, one way or another. As the crowd dispersed, Luis approached. Renee, you don't have to prove anything to this jackass, he whispered. I know, she replied, already studying the engine with intense focus. But I'm going to anyway. After her shift ended, Renee drove her modest Toyota Corolla to her apartment in a quiet neighborhood on the east side of the city. The 2-bedroom unit was simple but tidy, with furniture that had been chosen for function rather than style. What set Renee's home apart were the walls. Where most people might hang family photos or artwork, Renee's walls displayed framed certificates, awards, and plaques, all from NASA. Engineering Excellence Awards, commendations for breakthrough research, and recognition for leadership on classified projects. On her bookshelf sat advanced aerospace engineering textbooks, alongside theoretical physics volumes, many dog-eared and annotated in Renee's neat handwriting. In her bedroom, on the nightstand, stood a silver frame holding a photograph of a younger Renee in a NASA flight suit, standing proudly in front of a space shuttle. Beside her in the photo was a handsome man with warm brown eyes and an infectious smile, his arm around her shoulders. They both looked radiantly happy. Renee picked up the photo, tracing the man's face with her finger. You wouldn't believe the day I had, Caleb, she whispered. She was interrupted by the sound of her phone ringing. The screen showed blocked number. Renee hesitated before answering. Hello? You working on engines again, Commander Dawson? The male voice was deep and formal. Renee tensed. Who is this? Doctor, William Porter, NASA Security Division. We've detected some unusual activity in our database. Someone's been searching for information about your old project. Thought you should know. I haven't accessed any classified material, Renee said quickly. We know, Dr. Porter replied. That's what concerns us. Someone else has. Be careful, Commander. The line went dead. Renee stared at her phone, then at the photograph of Caleb. Her past, it seemed, was catching up to her. Meanwhile, in his luxury hotel suite, Carter Voss was having a private conversation with Luis and two other mechanics from Wilson's. I'll be blunt, Carter said, swirling an expensive whiskey in a crystal glass. I can't afford the optics of being shown up by, well, you know. He didn't have to specify who he meant. Make sure she doesn't succeed with that engine. You want us to sabotage her? Luis asked, uncomfortable. Carter frowned. That's such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as ensuring a fair playing field. After all, she's just a mechanic, and that engine was designed by aerospace engineers with PhDs. What's in it for us? Asked one of the other mechanics. Carter smiled. How does a management position in the new auto future sound? Once we automate most of the repair work, we'll need skilled supervisors. The men exchanged glances, but remained silent. Just keep her distracted, Carter continued. Misplace a tool here. Give her the wrong specs there. Nothing obvious. I'm not asking you to break anything. After they left, Carter made a phone call. It's me, he said. Run a deeper background check on Renee Dawson. There's something about her that seems familiar. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, Renee returned to the garage. She had a key, a privilege granted to senior mechanics for emergency client work. Tonight, however, she wasn't working on a customer's vehicle. The ARX-7 prototype sat in the corner of the shop, covered with a tarp. Renee removed the covering and circled the engine slowly, studying every inch with the careful eye of someone who knew exactly what she was looking at. From her bag, she pulled out a set of custom tools, precision instruments that looked more appropriate for surgery than auto repair. With methodical precision, she began dismantling the engine, laying out each component in an organized pattern that only made sense to her. As she worked, her hands moved with such confidence that it was clear. This wasn't the first time Renee Dawson had worked on an engine like this. The next morning, Luis arrived early to find Renee already at work, surrounded by neatly arranged engine parts. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she had been there all night. Renee, he said quietly, we need to talk. She didn't look up from the component she was examining. I'm listening. Luis shifted uncomfortably. Carter's planning to sabotage you. He pulled me and a couple of guys aside last night, offered us promotions if we helped make sure you fail. Now Renee looked up. And you're telling me this because it's wrong, Luis said, though he couldn't quite meet her eyes. Look, I don't know what your deal is, Renee. You barely talk, you never join us for beers, and sometimes you fix things in ways that make no sense until they work perfectly. But you're the best mechanic I've ever seen, and you don't deserve this. Renee studied him for a moment. Thank you for telling me, she said finally. Will you help me instead? Luis hesitated. I can't lose this job, Renee. I've got 2 kids in college, she nodded. I understand. Just don't get in my way. As Luis walked away, other mechanics began filtering in. They cast curious glances at Renee's workstation, and she heard their whispers. No way she fixes that thing. I've got $50 saying she quits by tomorrow. Carter's got engineers who couldn't fix it. What chance does she have? Renee ignored them all, focusing entirely on the task at hand. In her mind, she wasn't in Wilson's auto shop anymore. She was back in the clean room at NASA's Propulsion Research Complex 7 years earlier. The memory was vivid. Renee in a white lab coat, leading a team of brilliant engineers through the final design phase of Project Artemis, a classified propulsion system that would revolutionize space travel. The room hummed with energy as equations, filled whiteboards and computer simulations ran complex scenarios. Commander Dawson, a young engineer called out. The thermal exchange rates are off in the 4th quadrant. Renee moved to his station, examined the data, and quickly recalculated the formula. "Try this," she said, writing out a modified equation. The simulation ran again, this time showing perfect stability. "How do you do that?" the engineer asked in awe. Renee smiled. "Physics doesn't change, you just have to listen to what it's telling you." At the back of the room stood Caleb Mitchell, her fiancé and deputy project leader. His proud smile warmed her heart more than any professional achievement ever could. The memory dissolved as Frank's voice pulled her back to the present. "Hey Renee, you need any help with that thing?" She shook her head. "I'm good, thanks." "Well, don't say we didn't offer," Frank replied with a chuckle as he walked away. By mid-morning, a small film crew had arrived to document Carter's hands-on leadership approach at Wilson's. They set up lights and cameras, transforming the working garage into something resembling a movie set. Carter himself appeared an hour later, dressed in a more casual but still expensive outfit. Designer jeans and a button-down shirt with the sleeves carefully rolled up to appear relatable. He moved through the garage, positioning himself next to mechanics who were deep in their work, pretending to offer advice while cameras captured the staged mentorship. "Get a shot of me with the team working on that Chevy," Carter directed. "Make sure to catch me pointing at something important." When he approached Renee's station, she was nowhere to be found. The ARX-7 components were covered with a clean tarp. "Where's our female mechanic?" Carter asked, barely hiding his annoyance. "Supply run," Luis answered. "Said she needed specialized parts." Carter frowned. "Make sure she knows we're only allowing standard tools and parts for this challenge. No outside help." When Renee returned an hour later carrying several unmarked boxes, she found her toolbox had been moved and rearranged. Several specialized tools were missing, and the diagnostic tablet she'd been using had been reset to factory settings. She stood very still, surveying the situation, then methodically began checking every component she'd already cleaned and inspected. 3 had been subtly damaged, nothing obvious, but enough to cause catastrophic failure if installed. Instead of reporting the sabotage, Renee simply retrieved a spare toolbox from her car, this one with a heavy-duty lock, and continued working. She replaced the damaged components with ones from her unmarked boxes and proceeded as if nothing had happened. As the day progressed, a young woman in Auto Future's trainee uniform found reasons to pass by Renee's station repeatedly. Finally, during lunch break when the garage was nearly empty, she approached. "Excuse me, Ms. Dawson?" The young woman was, in her early 20s, with bright eyes and nervous energy. Her name tag read, Kira Thomas. Renee looked up. "Yes?" "I just wanted to say..." Kira glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "I recognize you from a documentary I watched in engineering school, Breaking Barriers, Women in Aerospace. You were in it for like 30 seconds, but I never forgot your name." Renee's expression remained neutral, but her posture tensed slightly. "Don't worry," Kira continued quickly. "I won't tell anyone. I'm not really a trainee. I have a master's in mechanical engineering, but no one would hire me because I didn't have real-world experience. When I saw you working here, I couldn't believe it. Would it be okay if I watched you work sometimes? After hours, maybe?" Renee studied the young woman for a long moment. "Be at the back door at 8 p.m. Don't tell anyone." Kira's face lit up. "Thank you. I won't let you down." As Kira hurried away, Renee noticed Luis watching the exchange from across the garage. The conflict was clear on his face. Loyalty to Renee battling against self-preservation. She remembered the day Luis had been passed over for promotion because she had solved a problem that had stumped the entire shop for weeks. The owner had praised her in front of everyone, and Luis's resentment had been palpable. He'd been cordial since then, but the competitive edge never fully disappeared. That afternoon, Carter brought in a group of engineers from Auto Future's Innovation Division. They stood around the ARX-7, pointing and discussing the design while occasionally glancing at Renee with barely concealed disdain. "The problem is in the combustion chamber design," one engineer said loudly enough for Renee to hear. "No amount of mechanical tinkering will fix a fundamental conceptual flaw." Another added, "It would take a complete redesign of the fuel delivery system." "She's wasting her time." Renee continued working, appearing to ignore them. On her workbench lay several pages of hand-drawn schematics, complex mathematical models and redesigned components that looked nothing like standard automotive engineering. One of the engineers drifted closer, intending to mock her efforts, but stopped short when he saw her calculations. His eyes widened in surprise. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again, casting a nervous glance at Carter before walking away. As evening approached and the garage emptied, Renee finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She sat alone on a stool, staring at the partially reassembled engine, fatigue evident in every line of her body. From her pocket, she pulled out a worn photograph, the same one from her nightstand, showing her and Caleb in their NASA days. She traced his face with her finger. "I owe you more than this failure," she whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "I owe you the truth." The sound of the back door opening made her quickly tuck the photo away. Kira entered hesitantly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might need this," she said, offering one to Renee. "Figured it's going to be a long night." Renee accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "You really want to help?" "More than anything," Kira replied earnestly. "Then I need you to understand something," Renee said, her voice low and serious. "This isn't just an engine. It's a statement." She gestured for Kira to come closer and began explaining her approach to the ARX-7, not as a mechanic fixing a broken engine, but as an engineer redesigning a flawed concept. Kira listened with rapt attention as Renee revealed a depth of knowledge that went far beyond automotive mechanics. Outside in the parking lot, Luis sat in his car, watching the light in the garage window. His phone buzzed with a text from Carter. "Update?" Luis stared at the message for a long time before finally typing his response. "She's still working. No progress yet." He put the phone down and continued watching the window, the war within himself still raging. Behind that window, Renee Dawson was no longer hiding who she truly was, at least not from Kira. "For the first time in years, Commander." Renee Dawson, former lead engineer of NASA's classified propulsion program, was bringing her full brilliance to bear on a problem worthy of her talents. And somewhere across town, in a long-term care facility, Caleb Mitchell lay unresponsive in a hospital bed, the silent catalyst for both Renee's greatest achievements and her most painful regrets. The morning sunlight slanted through the high windows of Wilson's auto shop, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Renee had worked through the night with Kira's help, and the ARX-7 engine was now partially reassembled. The 2 women had developed an efficient rhythm, with Renee directing and Kira following her instructions with impressive precision. "That's enough for now," Renee said, covering the engine with a clean tarp. "Get some rest, come back tonight." Kira nodded, fighting back a yawn. "This is amazing. The way you redesigned the fuel injection system, they don't teach that approach anywhere." "They do," Renee replied quietly. "Just not in automotive engineering programs." As Kira left through the back door, the front entrance of the garage opened. Carter Voss strode in with his usual entourage, looking fresh and energetic in contrast to Renee's exhaustion. Today, he had added several people in business attire to his group, investors, based on their expensive watches and attentive expressions. "And this is where the magic happens," Carter announced, gesturing around the garage with theatrical flair. "Soon, most of this will be automated. Our AI diagnostic systems will identify problems with 99.8% accuracy, and our robotic repair units will handle the grunt work." The investors nodded appreciatively, jotting notes on tablets and murmuring among themselves. "What about the mechanics?" one investor asked, an older woman with sharp eyes. "What happens to them?" Carter's smile never faltered. "We'll retain the best as supervisors and specialists for the complex cases that still require a human touch. The rest will be given generous severance packages. It's the price of progress, I'm afraid." His gaze landed on Renee, who was cleaning her tools with methodical care. "Speaking of which, how is our special project coming along?" Renee met his eyes but didn't respond. "Not feeling talkative today?" Carter's smile took on a harder edge. "Let's see what you've accomplished." He walked to her station and pulled the tarp off the engine. His confident expression faltered slightly as he examined the partially assembled ARX-7. Even to his untrained eye, it looked different, more streamlined, with several components modified or completely redesigned. "What have you done to it?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "Fix the design flaws," Renee stated simply. The original configuration couldn't achieve stable combustion because the fuel delivery system was fundamentally incompatible with the compression ratios. Carter's eyes narrowed. "You weren't supposed to redesign it. You were supposed to fix it as is." "You asked for it to run according to specifications," Renee countered. "This was the only way." One of the investors stepped forward, intrigued. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the engine. Renee nodded, and the man examined her work with a professional eye. "Interesting approach," he said after a moment. "Where did you learn this technique?" Before Renee could answer, Carter interrupted. "We should continue our tour. I want to show you the prototype of our automated diagnostic station." As the group moved away, Carter lingered behind for a moment. "Don't get comfortable with your little project," he said quietly to Renee. "Your position here is far from secure." Later that afternoon, Renee took the engine through its first test run. The mechanics gathered around, curious despite their skepticism. Luis stood slightly apart from the group, his expression unreadable. Renee connected the final wires and nodded to Kira, who had returned to watch. "Start it up." Kira pressed the ignition button. The engine sputtered, coughed, then hummed to life. The sound was unlike any conventional engine, smoother, with an almost musical quality to its purr. "Holy shit," Frank whispered. "It works." But as quickly as it had started, the engine faltered and died. Renee frowned, examining the readouts on her tablet. "What happened?" Luis asked, stepping closer. "Fuel mixture is off," Renee replied, already making adjustments. "And there's an issue with the cooling system. It's close, but not there yet." Word of the partial success reached Carter quickly. That evening, he held an impromptu press conference in front of the garage, standing before a backdrop emblazoned with the Auto Future logo. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for automotive technology," he announced to the assembled reporters. "My team at Auto Future is developing revolutionary AI-based diagnostic and repair systems that will transform how we maintain vehicles." A reporter raised her hand. "We've heard rumors about a special engine project happening here. Can you tell us about that?" Carter's smile remained fixed. "That's a small side project, an older prototype we're using for training purposes. The real innovation is in our automated systems, which will be rolling out nationwide within 6 months." Back inside the garage, Kira was hunched over her laptop, scrolling through old articles and videos. "Renee," she called softly, "you need to see this." Renee walked over, wiping her hands on a rag. On the screen was a 7-year-old news article. NASA's Project Artemis lead engineer resigns following test incident. The article featured a younger Renee in a NASA uniform, looking solemnly at the camera. The text described a catastrophic failure during a classified propulsion test that had injured several team members. The details were sparse due to the classified nature of the project, but it mentioned that Commander Renee Dawson had resigned shortly after, despite being cleared of any wrongdoing. "There's more," Kira said, opening another window. This one showed a confidential NASA incident report that had been partially redacted. "I found this in a declassified FOIA database. One of the injured was Deputy Project Leader Caleb Mitchell. He sustained severe neurological trauma." Renee's face remained impassive, but her hands gripped the edge of the workbench until her knuckles turned white. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because I think Carter Voss knows," Kira replied. "I did some digging. 7 years ago, he was working as a consultant for Quantum Aerospace, a NASA subcontractor that lost the bid for the propulsion system your team was developing." Renee closed her eyes briefly. "You should go home, Kira." "But go home, I need to think." After Kira left, Renee sat alone in the dimly lit garage, the weight of the past pressing down on her. She opened her phone and looked at the photo of her and Caleb, taken just days before the accident. They had been planning their wedding, dreaming of a future together exploring the boundaries of aerospace engineering. Then came the test failure, the investigation, the endless questions, and finally, Caleb's diagnosis. Permanent neurological damage with minimal chance of recovery. She had resigned not because of guilt. The investigation had concluded that the failure was due to a manufacturing defect in a component supplied by an outside vendor, but because she couldn't bear to continue the work that had cost her everything that mattered. The next morning, Renee arrived to find Luis waiting for her, his expression grim. "Carter wants to see you in the office," he said. Renee nodded and made her way to the small office at the back of the garage. Carter sat behind the desk, a tablet in front of him displaying what appeared to be her NASA personnel file. "Commander Dawson," he said, emphasizing her former title. "I knew I recognized you from somewhere." Renee remained standing, saying nothing. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that the quiet mechanic in my garage was once the brilliant leader of NASA's most classified propulsion program. Carter leaned back in his chair. "The same program that rejected my company's design proposals and cost us millions in development." "Your designs were flawed," Renee said simply. "They would have failed catastrophically under real-world conditions." Carter's pleasant mask slipped, revealing a flash of genuine anger. "You don't remember me, do you?" "I was there at the review board, junior partner, sitting in the back. I watched you demolish months of my work in less than 10 minutes. "I remember," Renee replied. "Your calculations for thermal dissipation were based on ideal conditions that would never exist in actual operation." His jaw tightened. "And yet, look where we both ended up. I'm running a multi-million-dollar company, and you're a grease monkey hiding from your past. What do you want, Carter?" He smiled, the anger disappearing behind his practiced corporate facade. "I want you to stop. Work on the ARX-7 immediately. The design modifications you've made constitute theft of corporate intellectual property. You challenged me to fix it. That's what I'm doing." Carter shook his head. "The challenge was a test of mechanical skill, not an invitation to redesign proprietary technology. As of this moment, you're terminated from Wilson's Auto Shop. Security will escort you out." Two large men in Auto Future security uniforms appeared at the door. Renee looked at them, then back at Carter. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "No, Commander Dawson," Carter replied, emphasizing her title mockingly. "The mistake was yours when you decided to play engineer again after your last project put people in the hospital." Renee's expression didn't change, but something cold and hard flashed in her eyes. Without another word, she turned and walked out, the security guards following close behind. The mechanics watched in confusion as Renee was escorted to her locker to collect her personal items. No one spoke to her or questioned what was happening. Only Kira approached, her face twisted with indignation. "This is wrong," she said. "He can't do this." "He can," Renee replied calmly. "It's his company." "But the engine, your work. Let it go, Kira. Some battles aren't worth fighting." As Renee walked out of the garage for what seemed like the last time, Luis stepped forward. "Renee, I didn't know he was going to." She cut him off with a look. "Save it, Luis. We both know what happened here." That night, Kira sat in her small apartment fuming with righteous anger. She opened her laptop and began typing furiously, compiling everything she had found about Renee's NASA career, the accident, and Carter's connection to it all. She added links to technical papers Renee had published, testimonials from former colleagues, and footage from the NASA documentary that had briefly featured her. With a deep breath, Kira published the entire collection to her engineering blog and shared it across multiple social media platforms with the caption, "The Silenced Genius, How Corporate America Punishes Excellence." By morning, the post had gone viral. Engineering students, women in STEM, and industry professionals were sharing it with outraged comments about Carter's treatment of Renee. News outlets picked up the story, with headlines questioning why one of NASA's most brilliant engineers was working as an auto mechanic and had now been fired for her excellence. Meanwhile, Renee had disappeared. She wasn't answering her phone, and no one answered when Kira knocked on her apartment door. Unknown. To anyone, Renee had driven 3 hours to a specialized long-term care facility in the countryside. The Meadowbrook Care Center was a peaceful place surrounded by gardens and trees. Renee walked through its quiet corridors until she reached room 217. Inside, lying in a hospital bed surrounded by monitoring equipment, was Caleb Mitchell. Oh my, body was thin but well cared for, his face serene in its stillness. Only the slow rise and fall of his chest indicated that he was alive. Renee sat beside him and took his hand. "I tried to live in silence," she whispered. "I thought if I stayed small, stayed hidden, the past couldn't find me." She squeezed his unresponsive hand. But it did anyway. She spent hours talking to him, explaining everything that had happened with the ARX-7 engine and Carter Voss. As the sun began to set, she stood to leave, placing a gentle kiss on Caleb's forehead. "I miss you," she said simply. "Every day." When Renee returned to her apartment, she found Kira waiting outside her door. "Everyone's looking for you," Kira said without preamble. "Your story is everywhere." "What did you do?" Renee asked, her voice sharp with rare anger. Kira handed her a tablet. On it was her viral post, now with over 1 million views and thousands of comments. Below it were news articles from major publications. Former NASA engineer fired for excellence, the Renee Dawson story. AutoFuture CEO, under fire for discriminatory practices. Hidden genius, why was one of NASA's brightest working as a mechanic? "I had to," Kira said, her chin raised defiantly. "What he did was wrong." Renee closed her eyes briefly. "You had no right." "Maybe not," Kira admitted. "But I couldn't just watch him win. Not when I know what you're capable of." Renee was silent for a long moment, then asked, "How bad is it?" "For Carter." "Pretty bad. Some of AutoFuture's investors are asking questions and—" Kira hesitated. "People want to hear from you. Your side of the story." Renee shook her head. "I'm not interested in being anyone's viral sensation." "Then do it for the engine," Kira urged. "The ARX-7. Your design improvements were revolutionary. Are you really going to let Carter claim them as his own?" That struck a chord. Renee had walked away from her work once before with devastating consequences. Could she do it again? "What's your plan?" she finally asked. Kira's face lit up. "We go back. Not through the front door. I still have my trainee access card for the night shift. We finish the engine on our terms." Renee considered this. "We'd need help. Parts, tools, access to the testing bay." "I might know someone who would help," Kira said hesitantly. "If you're willing to trust him." That night, Renee and Kira met Luis in the parking lot behind Wilson's auto shop. He looked nervous, constantly glancing around to make sure they weren't seen. "I can get you in," he said without preamble. "But if anyone finds out, I lose everything." "Why help us now?" Renee asked, her voice cool. Luis met her gaze directly for the first time. "Because I was wrong. Because what Carter's doing isn't just unfair, it's theft. He's planning to take your work and pass it off as his innovation team's breakthrough." "How do you know that?" "Because he offered me a job supervising the implementation of his new engine design across all AutoFuture locations." Renee nodded slowly. "If we do this, we're not just fixing the engine. We're rebuilding it from scratch, with improvements." "What kind of improvements?" Luis asked. "The kind that will make it impossible for him to claim as his own," Renee replied, a spark of determination in her eyes. And so began 3 days of secret work. Kira used her access card to let them in after hours. Luis diverted security with false alarm triggers in other parts of the building. And Renee worked with a focus and intensity that left the others in awe. She wasn't just rebuilding the ARX-7, she was transforming it, incorporating elements of the plasma propulsion system she had developed at NASA. It wasn't a full implementation, that would require resources they didn't have, but it was enough to create a unique signature that no one could mistake. On the third night, as they prepared for the final assembly, Kira noticed something on her phone. "Renee," she said urgently, "you need to see this." On the screen was an announcement from AutoFuture. Revolutionary new engine technology to be unveiled at tomorrow's press conference. CEO Carter Voss to demonstrate breakthrough in clean energy propulsion. He's going to claim your work, Louis said, anger evident in his voice. Tomorrow. Renee looked at the partially assembled engine before them. Then we finish tonight. The morning of Carter's press conference dawned bright and clear. The front of Wilson's Auto Shop had been transformed with a stage, professional lighting, and seating for journalists and industry representatives. Auto Future banners hung everywhere, proclaiming, "The future of automotive technology starts today." Behind the stage, Carter was reviewing his presentation with his PR team, practiced smile firmly in place. After the introduction, "We'll unveil the engine," he instructed. "Make sure the cameras get my good side when I explain the revolutionary fuel injection system." "Mr. Voss," a nervous assistant interrupted. "There's a situation." Carter frowned. "What kind of situation?" "It's the engine, sir. It's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" Carter's voice rose sharply. "It's not in the testing bay where we left it. And there's something else." The assistant handed him a tablet. This just went live on all major automotive news sites. On the screen was a live stream titled, "The Truth About Innovation." It showed the ARX-7 engine, or rather a transformed version of it, sitting in what appeared to be the back room of Wilson's Auto Shop. Standing beside it was Renee Dawson, looking directly into the camera. "My name is Commander Renee Dawson," she said, her voice calm and authoritative. "Former lead engineer of NASA's Project Artemis. Today I'm setting the record straight about innovation, credit, and truth." Carter's face drained of color. "Shut it down," he ordered. Now. But it was too late. The live stream was being shared across platforms, with viewers increasing by the thousands every minute. Outside, journalists were already watching it on their phones, murmuring excitedly among themselves. On the screen, Renee continued. 3 days ago, I was fired from my position as a mechanic for improving an engine I was challenged to fix. Today I'm going to show you what that engine can really do, and why the person claiming credit for it couldn't possibly have designed it." She turned to the engine and began a detailed explanation of the modifications she had made, using language that only someone with advanced aerospace engineering knowledge could have mastered. She pointed out the flaws in the original design, demonstrated her solutions, and explained the principles behind her improvements. "And now," she said, "we'll start it up." The camera moved to show Kira standing at a control panel. She pressed a button, and the engine came to life. Not with the rough sputter of their earlier attempt, but with a smooth, powerful hum that was unlike anything a conventional engine would produce. The sound was almost musical in its perfection. The readings on the display panel showed extraordinary efficiency levels and minimal emissions. The engine was running at peak performance, with a fraction of the fuel consumption of a standard model. Outside, the crowd at Carter's press conference had turned their attention entirely to the live stream. Reporters were already calling their editors, changing their stories from Carter's announcement to Renee's demonstration. Carter stormed into the garage, security guards and PR team in tow, to find Renee, Kira, and Luis standing beside the running engine. Camera phones were recording everything. "Turn that off immediately," Carter demanded. "This is corporate espionage and theft of intellectual property." Renee faced him calmly. "Nothing was stolen, Mr. Voss. You challenged me to fix a broken engine. I did exactly that. With unauthorized modifications using proprietary technology." "Actually," came a new voice from the doorway, "the technology in question belongs to NASA, not Auto Future." All heads turned to see an elegant older woman walking into the garage. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried herself with the confident authority of someone used to being in charge. "Dr. Martina Lee," the woman introduced herself, former director of propulsion research at NASA, and Renee's mentor. Carter's expression flickered between confusion and alarm. "This is a private corporate matter, Dr. Lee. It doesn't concern NASA." "I'm afraid it does," Dr. Lee replied coolly. "The core technology being implemented here was developed under Project Artemis, which remains partially classified. Furthermore, our records indicate that Quantum Aerospace, your former employer, Mr. Voss, was explicitly denied rights to this technology 7 years ago due to safety concerns." She turned to Renee with a warm smile. "It's good to see you working again, Commander. Your improvements to the plasma containment field are particularly impressive. Renee nodded, a flash of emotion crossing her face at the use of her former title. Thank you, Dr. Lee. Reporters had followed the confrontation inside, their cameras capturing every moment. Carter tried to regain control of the situation. This is a publicity stunt, he declared loudly. Ms. Dawson was a junior assembler who followed my team's instructions. The design is entirely AutoFuture's intellectual property. Is that so? Kira stepped forward, tablet in hand. Then perhaps you can explain these? She projected a series of video clips onto the wall. They showed Renee working on the engine over the past 3 nights, drawing complex schematics, calculating equations, and implementing design changes that were clearly her own. The timestamps can't be faked, Kira explained to the now captivated reporters. And neither can the math. Anyone with an engineering background can see that these are original calculations, not something copied from existing designs. Carter's face flushed with anger. She was an employee working on company time with company resources. Anything she developed belongs to AutoFuture. Former employee, Louise corrected, stepping forward. You fired her before she made these modifications. And as for company resources, he held up receipts. Every part, every tool used in this rebuild was purchased privately. I have the documentation right here. The story was spinning rapidly out of Carter's control. Reporters were firing questions from all directions. Photographers were capturing his increasingly desperate expression, and the elegant hum of Renee's engine provided a perfect soundtrack to his downfall. As the chaos unfolded, Renee stood quietly, beside her creation, neither gloating nor arguing. When a reporter asked her directly why she had been working as a mechanic instead of an engineer, she answered simply. Sometimes, she said, we need to step away from who we were to find out who we can become. The media frenzy continued to build throughout the day. By evening, automotive blogs were publishing detailed analyses of Renee's engine design, praising its innovative approach to clean energy. Tech magazines were running profiles of her NASA career and mysterious disappearance from the aerospace world. Social media was flooded with clips of Carter's increasingly defensive responses, contrasted with Renee's calm expertise. The next morning, Renee received a call from an unfamiliar number. Commander Dawson, a formal voice greeted her. This is Martin Hoffman, chairperson of AutoFuture's board of directors. We'd like to speak with you at your earliest convenience. 3 hours later, Renee sat in a luxurious conference room at AutoFuture's corporate headquarters. Around the massive table sat 8 board members, all watching her with varying degrees of curiosity and respect. Ms. Dawson, Hoffman began, the events of yesterday have placed our company in a complicated position. I understand, Renee replied. Mr. Voss has been suspended pending an internal investigation, Hoffman continued. His handling of the situation was unacceptable, and preliminary findings suggest he may have deliberately misrepresented several aspects of the engine project to this board. Murmurs of agreement came from the other members. We would like to offer you a position as Chief Innovation Officer for AutoFuture's new Research and Development Division. Your expertise in propulsion technology is precisely what this company needs to move forward in the clean energy space. Renee considered the offer carefully before responding. I'm grateful for the opportunity, she said finally. But I have 3 conditions. Hoffman raised an eyebrow. And those would be? First, Carter Voss is removed permanently, not just suspended. Second, my team, including Kira Thomas and Luis Alvarez, is absorbed into the R&D division with appropriate titles and compensation. And third, I retain full intellectual property rights to my engine design, with AutoFuture receiving a non-exclusive license to use the technology. The board members exchanged glances. Hoffman leaned forward. Those are substantial demands, Ms. Dawson. They're non-negotiable, Renee replied calmly. The technology I've developed has applications far beyond automotive use. I intend to see it implemented where it can do the most good, not just where it can generate the most profit. Before Hoffman could respond, his assistant entered and whispered something in his ear. His expression changed. It seems we have another factor to consider, he said, turning back to Renee. Dr. Lee from NASA is in the lobby. She says she has a proposal that might interest all parties. Minutes later, Dr. Lee joined the meeting. She greeted Renee warmly before addressing the board. NASA has been following recent developments with great interest, she said. Commander Dawson's innovations in plasma propulsion represent a significant advancement that could benefit multiple industries. We're prepared to offer a joint development agreement between NASA, AutoFuture, and Commander Dawson as an independent contractor. The discussion continued for hours with proposals and counter-proposals flying across the table. Through it all, Renee remained composed, her years of NASA leadership experience evident in how she navigated the complex negotiations. By the end of the day, an agreement had been reached. Renee would lead a new joint initiative between NASA and AutoFuture, focusing on clean energy applications of her propulsion technology. Kira and Luis would join her team, along with selected engineers from both organizations. As Renee left the building, Dr. Lee walked with her to the parking lot. "You could have come back to us at any time, you know," the older woman said gently. "No one at NASA ever blamed you for what happened." "I blamed myself," Renee replied. "I still do." Dr. Lee stopped, turning to face her former protege. "Caleb wouldn't want this for you, Renee. He believed in your work more than anyone." Renee's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "He paid the price for my ambition." "No," Dr. Lee said firmly. "He paid the price for a manufacturing defect that no one could have detected. The investigation was conclusive." Before Renee could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from the Meadowbrook Care Center. Her heart nearly stopped as she read the message. "Patient Caleb Mitchell has shown signs of increased brain activity. Please call immediately." Renee looked up at Dr. Lee, her eyes wide with shock and fragile hope. "Go," Dr. Lee said, understanding immediately. "I'll handle things here." As Renee drove toward the care facility, her mind raced with possibilities. After 7 years of silence, was Caleb finally coming back? And if he was, what would he think of the woman she had become, the woman who had hidden from her gifts for so long? The answer awaited her at Meadowbrook, where the impossible was suddenly becoming possible, just like the engine that had changed everything. The highway stretched before Renee as she drove toward Meadowbrook Care Center, her mind racing faster than her car. The message from the facility kept replaying in her thoughts. Patient Caleb Mitchell has shown signs of increased brain activity. After 7 years of stillness, something had changed. When she arrived, Dr. Powell, Caleb's neurologist, was waiting for her. "Commander Dawson," he greeted her, leading her through the quiet corridors. "We detected significant changes in Mr. Mitchell's brainwave patterns this morning. It's not a full awakening, but it's the most activity we've seen since he was admitted." "What caused it?" Renee asked, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Dr. Powell smiled slightly. "Interestingly, it happened while the television in his room was playing a news report. About you, actually. Your engine demonstration." Renee stopped walking. "He heard me?" "It's possible. Patients in his condition often retain some level of auditory processing." Something resonated. They reached Caleb's room, and Renee entered alone. He looked the same, peaceful, still, but the monitors beside his bed showed different patterns than she'd seen before. She sat beside him and took his hand. "I'm here, Caleb," she whispered. "I found my way back. Maybe you can too." She stayed for hours, talking to him about everything that had happened: the engine, Carter, the media storm, the board meeting. As evening approached, a nurse gently suggested that Renee get some rest. "We'll call immediately if there's any change," she promised. Reluctantly, Renee drove to her apartment, where she found Kira waiting with takeout food and a stack of newspapers. "You're on every front page," Kira announced, spreading them out on the coffee table. "The black female engineer who outsmarted a corporate giant." Renee picked up one paper with the headline, "NASA Genius Exposes Tech Discrimination." Another, "Frida's Innovation vs. Intimidation, the Renee Dawson story." "This isn't what I wanted," Renee said quietly. "Maybe it's what was needed," Kira replied. "Look at this." She opened her laptop to show Renee an email inbox flooded with messages. "These are all for you. Engineering students, Women in STEM, survivors of workplace discrimination. You've become a symbol, Renee. Renee scrolled through the messages. Heartfelt. Thanks. Stories of similar experiences. Expressions of newfound courage inspired by her stand. There's more, Kira continued. An online petition demanding Carter's removal has over 3 million signatures. Major tech blogs are running exposés on his history of taking credit for other people's work. And NASA has issued a formal statement confirming your role in Project Artemis. Before Renee could respond, her phone rang. It was Luis. You need to know what's happening, he said without preamble. Carter's not going down without a fight. He's meeting with investors, trying to salvage his position. Let him try, Renee replied, too emotionally drained to feel concerned. It's worse than that, Luis continued. He's digging into your past, looking for anything he can use against you. The next morning proved Luis right. Several tech blogs published leaked footage of Renee arguing with a colleague at NASA, edited to make her appear unstable. Anonymous sources claimed she had been difficult to work with, prone to taking unnecessary risks. Dr. Lee called immediately. Don't engage with this nonsense, she advised. We're handling it from our end. By afternoon, NASA had released internal records from the accident investigation, conclusively showing that Renee had not only followed all safety protocols, but had actually identified the potential component failure before it happened. Her warnings had been documented but overruled by procurement officials who insisted the parts met specifications. The media narrative shifted again, now portraying Renee as a whistleblower who had been ignored, then scapegoated. Meanwhile, the Auto Future Board called an emergency session. Public pressure was mounting for decisive action against Carter, and major investors were threatening to pull out if the situation wasn't resolved. Martin Hoffman, the board chair, made the call to Renee himself. The board has voted unanimously to terminate Carter Voss's employment, effective immediately, he informed her. We'd like to move forward with your proposed innovation lab, with full funding and the team structure you requested. Renee took a deep breath. And my intellectual property rights? Granted, as specified in your terms. Auto Future will retain non-exclusive licensing, with royalties paid for all commercial applications. It was a complete victory, one that left Renee feeling strangely hollow. Success had come so suddenly after years of self-imposed exile that she barely knew how to process it. That evening, as media requests continued to flood in, Renee returned to Meadowbrook. She needed the quiet, the perspective that came from sitting with Caleb. She found Dr. Powell waiting for her, his expression cautiously optimistic. There's been more activity today, he said. Stronger responses to stimuli. We've adjusted his medication to support potential increased consciousness. Renee nodded her thanks and entered Caleb's room. She sat beside him and began her now familiar monologue, updating him on the day's events. Halfway through, she noticed his eyelids flutter slightly. Caleb, she whispered, heart pounding. His eyes opened, just barely, just briefly, before closing again. But in that moment, there was a flicker of recognition that sent electricity through Renee's veins. She pressed the call button, and medical staff rushed in, checking monitors and performing quick assessments. This is promising, Dr. Powell said, examining Caleb's responses. Very promising. But remember, recovery from prolonged coma is typically a gradual process, not a sudden awakening. Renee barely heard him. In that brief moment of connection, she had seen the man she loved looking back at her. Nothing else mattered. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, interviews, and hospital visits. Renee agreed to a single televised interview with a respected science journalist, where she spoke candidly about her experiences both at NASA and as a mechanic. She avoided criticizing Carter directly, instead focusing on the broader issues of recognition and opportunity in technical fields. The problem isn't just individual bad actors, she explained. It's systems that assume brilliance has a specific appearance. I disappeared myself because I couldn't bear the weight of what happened, but hiding our light doesn't serve anyone, not ourselves, not progress, and certainly not those who come after us. Her words resonated far beyond the engineering community. Overnight, Renee became a reluctant icon for anyone who had ever been dismissed or underestimated. At Meadowbrook, Caleb continued showing signs of increased awareness, longer periods, with open eyes, occasional hand squeezes, subtle reactions to voices. On the 5th day after her public demonstration, Renee arrived to find him more alert than she had seen him in 7 years. "Hi," she said softly, taking his hand. His lips moved slightly, forming shapes that might have been words if he'd had the strength to voice them. Renee leaned closer, and then, in a voice raspy from years of disuse, Caleb whispered 4 words that shattered and rebuilt her world simultaneously. "Did you finish it?" Tears spilled down Renee's face as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered back. "Yes, I did." 3 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. Spring bloomed across the city as Renee oversaw the creation of what she had named Project Phoenix, a research and development lab housed in a renovated factory building in her old neighborhood. The facility combined cutting-edge technology with community accessibility. One wing contained state-of-the-art engineering laboratories, where Renee's team worked on refining and expanding applications for her propulsion system. Another wing housed classrooms and training spaces open to local residents, particularly youth from underserved communities. On a bright May morning, Renee stood in the main atrium, watching workers install the Project Phoenix logo, a stylized engine surrounded by rising flames, above the entrance doors. "What do you think?" Kira asked, joining her. In the months since their public stand against Carter, Kira had grown from eager assistant to confident project manager, overseeing much of the lab's day-to-day operations. "It's better than I imagined," Renee replied honestly. "When I left NASA, I never thought I'd build anything again." Luis approached, carrying blueprints for the community workshop space. "The contractor has some questions about the ventilation system," he said. "Also, Jackson called. He can start Monday if the offer still stands." Renee nodded. "Tell him we're looking forward to it." Jackson Walters had been a factory worker laid off when automation replaced his position. He had no formal engineering training but possessed an intuitive understanding of mechanical systems that Renee recognized immediately during his interview. He was the 5th former factory worker she had hired, part of her commitment to finding overlooked talent. The hiring strategy raised eyebrows among traditional engineers, but Renee remained firm. Her team now included former mechanics, single mothers returning to the workforce, and even 2 ex-convicts with self-taught programming skills. Alongside them worked NASA-trained engineers and university researchers, creating an unconventional but remarkably effective team. "The supply chain manager from AutoFuture is here for your meeting," Kira reminded her. "And Dr. Lee called. NASA approved the additional funding for the educational outreach program." As Renee headed to her office, she passed the memorial wall, a simple display honoring the Project Artemis team members who had been injured in the accident 7 years ago. It had been Kira's idea, a way of acknowledging the past while moving forward. Renee had resisted at first, but now found it strangely comforting. Her office was deliberately modest. She wanted resources focused on the labs and community spaces, not executive comforts. The only personal touches were a small plant and a new photograph, Caleb in his wheelchair during his first visit to Project Phoenix 2 weeks earlier. His recovery continued to progress slowly but steadily. He had regained some speech capability and limited movement in his upper body. The doctors remained cautiously optimistic about further improvement, though they warned that a full recovery was unlikely after such prolonged neural inactivity. Renee didn't care. Having Caleb back in any capacity felt like a miracle she had no right to expect. That evening, after most staff had gone home, Renee sat alone in the testing bay, watching the prototype of their latest engine run through its diagnostic cycle. The soft hum filled the room, a sound that still brought her a sense of peace and accomplishment. She was so absorbed that she didn't hear Caleb's wheelchair until it was beside her. "Thinking deep thoughts?" he asked, his speech careful but clear. "The result of intensive therapy." Renee smiled, just enjoying the moment. "How was physical therapy today?" "Brutal," he replied with a small grin. "Worth it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the engine together. So much remained unspoken between them. The years lost, the pain endured, the uncertain future. But they had developed a new way of being together, taking each day as it came. "Have doubts sometimes," Renee admitted quietly. "About all of this. Whether I'm the right person to lead it." Caleb studied her face. "The woman I knew never doubted her abilities. The woman you knew disappeared for a long time." "Not completely," he countered. "She was hiding, but she was still there, still fixing things no one else could." Before Renee could respond, her phone buzzed with a security alert. The system showed someone at the main entrance, a man in an expensive suit pacing impatiently. Renee frowned at the image. "That's James Whitfield, Carter's former head of PR." "Want me to get rid of him?" Caleb offered, only half joking. Renee shook her head. "I'll see what he wants." She found Whitfield in the lobby looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Commander Dawson," he greeted her, extending his hand. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment." "What can I do for you, Mr. Whitfield?" Renee asked, not taking his hand. He lowered it awkwardly. "I wanted to discuss a potential opportunity. I've started a new consulting firm specializing in technical innovation PR. Your story has tremendous appeal, and I believe we could craft a powerful narrative around Project Phoenix." "You want to represent me?" Renee asked, incredulous. "After everything that happened with Carter?" Whitfield smiled smoothly. "Business is business, Commander. The public loves a redemption story, and yours has all the elements of a bestseller. We could secure book deals, speaking engagements, perhaps even film rights." Renee studied him for a moment. "You've mistaken what happened as a publicity stunt, Mr. Whitfield. It wasn't. It was about the work, the engines, the technology, the potential to create actual change." "Of course," he backpedaled quickly. "And amplifying your story would help spread that message to a wider audience." "My story isn't for sale," Renee said firmly. "And neither is Project Phoenix. Our work will speak for itself." After showing him out, Renee returned to find Caleb waiting with a knowing smile. "Let me guess," he said. "Someone wanting to capitalize on your fame?" "Something like that." She sat beside him. "I never wanted to be a symbol or an inspiration. I just wanted to build engines. Sometimes we don't get to choose what we become." "To others," Caleb replied. "But we do get to choose what we do with it." The following week brought a different kind of challenge. Project Phoenix was scheduled to demonstrate its first complete prototype, a compact, efficient engine for public transportation that produced virtually zero emissions. Local officials, industry representatives, and community members had been invited. The night before the demonstration, disaster struck. A power surge damaged the prototype's control systems, requiring emergency repairs. The team worked through the night, but by morning, it was clear they wouldn't be ready in time. "We should postpone," Luis advised, exhaustion evident in his voice. "No," said a new voice. Sarah Johnson, one of the single mothers Renee had hired as a technician, stepped forward. "I have an idea." Sarah had been quietly developing a backup system on her own time, inspired by something Renee had mentioned months earlier. It wasn't as refined as the primary system, but her calculations suggested it would work. "It's untested," Renee cautioned. "So was your stand against Carter," Sarah replied. "Sometimes you have to trust your work." With no better options, they implemented Sarah's system. When the demonstration began, Renee acknowledged the last-minute change and publicly credited Sarah for the solution, something Carter would never have done. The engine performed flawlessly. Afterward, as local news crews filmed interviews with various team members, Renee found herself approached by a group of neighborhood children who had attended with their school. "Are you really the lady who built the magic engine?" a young girl asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Renee knelt to the child's level. "It's not magic, it's science and engineering, and yes, I helped build it along with my whole team." "My teacher says girls can be engineers too," the girl said solemnly. "Your teacher is absolutely right," Renee replied. "Anyone can be an engineer if they love solving problems and aren't afraid to try new ideas." Another child spoke up. "My dad Says you used to work on spaceships. Is that true? It is, Renee confirmed. I helped design engines that could work in space. Why did you stop? The first girl asked innocently. The question hit Renee like a physical blow. How could she explain? Trauma, guilt, and self-exile to a child? But as she looked at their curious faces, she realized they deserved something real, not a sanitized version. I made a mistake, she said carefully. Not with the engines. They worked exactly as designed. But I stopped believing in myself. I thought if I made myself smaller, if I hid my abilities, I couldn't fail again. Did it work? Another child asked. Renee smiled sadly. No. It just meant I wasn't there to help when I could have been. But you're helping now, the first girl pointed out with impeccable child logic. Yes, Renee agreed, feeling something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Yes, I am. That evening, Renee met with Dr. Lee in her office. The NASA veteran had become a regular visitor to Project Phoenix, offering guidance and helping secure partnerships. The demonstration was impressive, Dr. Lee commented, especially the quick thinking with the backup system. That was all, Sarah, Renee replied. I would have postponed. Dr. Lee smiled knowingly. You've always been better at trusting others' abilities than your own. It's why you were such an effective leader at NASA, and why you're succeeding here. We've still got a long way to go, Renee cautioned. The commercial applications are at least a year from market readiness. That's not what I meant, Dr. Lee said gently. Look around you, Renee. You've created something remarkable here. Not just technology, but opportunity. You're rebuilding lives, not just engines. Through the office window, they could see Kira leading a training session for local high school students. In another room, Luis was mentoring a team of community members on basic engineering principles. Even Caleb was engaged, using his expertise to help the software team refine their simulation models. It's a start, Renee conceded. Later that night, she drove Caleb back to his new apartment near the facility. His recovery had progressed enough that he could live independently with minimal assistance, a fact that filled Renee with quiet joy. Stay. For dinner? He asked as she helped him from the car to his wheelchair. I should get back to the lab, she began automatically, then caught herself. Actually, dinner sounds good. Inside, as Caleb prepared a simple meal with practiced movements, Renee found herself studying him. The lines of concentration on his face, the determined way he adapted to his physical limitations, the occasional smile that still made her heart skip. What? He asked, catching her gaze. I was just thinking about rebuilding, she said, about how it never looks quite like what was there before. Is that a bad thing? He asked, understanding immediately that she wasn't talking about engines. Renee considered the question seriously. No, she said finally. Sometimes the new version is stronger where it was broken. Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. Not broken, he corrected gently. Redesigned. 1 year after the founding of Project Phoenix, Renee stood at the window of her office, watching rain streak down the glass. The weather matched her mood, unsettled and gray. On her desk lay a legal notice that had arrived that morning. Carter Voss was back, and he was coming for everything she had built. The door opened, and Kira entered with coffee and a concerned expression. At 25, she had matured into a poised young professional, her earlier nervous energy channeled into focused determination. Luis is gathering the team, she said, placing the coffee on Renee's desk. Dr. Lee is on her way from Washington. Renee nodded, still staring at the brain. Have you seen it? The website? Yes. Kira's voice tightened. It went live this morning. Neocore Systems had appeared seemingly overnight, a flashy startup with a sleek website showcasing what they called the first civilian-friendly plasma engine. The promotional video featured none other than Carter Voss, rebranded as a visionary entrepreneur bringing revolutionary technology to the masses. The engine he displayed looked remarkably similar to Renee's designs. The patent application was filed last week, Kira continued. They're claiming primary development rights on the core technology, and they've initiated a cease and desist against us for infringing on their intellectual property. Renee finally turned from the window. They can't possibly think this will work. The documentation trail is clear. Our patents were filed months ago. It's not about winning, came Luis's voice as he entered the office. It's about dragging us into an expensive legal battle that drains our resources and scares off partners. He looked grim. It's a classic corporate bullying tactic. Within hours, Project Phoenix's legal team had assembled in the conference room. The situation was indeed serious. Carter had secured substantial venture capital funding for Neocore, giving him deep pockets for a protracted legal fight. He had also hired one of the most aggressive intellectual property firms in the country. Their claim hinges on the argument that the core technology was developed while Commander Dawson was employed by Auto Future, explained Gloria Winters, Phoenix's lead counsel. They're saying anything created during that period belongs to them, regardless of our subsequent agreements with Auto Future's board. That's absurd, Kira protested. Renee was fired before she developed the current system. And the board explicitly granted her the IP rights, Luis added. Gloria nodded. Which is why we'll win, eventually. But these cases can take years, and the publicity alone could scare away investors. Dr. Lee, who had arrived midway through the meeting, spoke up. What about the NASA connection? The technology evolved from classified work. They've addressed that, Gloria replied. They're claiming sufficient modifications to constitute a new invention. It's flimsy, but enough to muddy the waters. As the legal team continued discussing strategy, Renee excused herself. She found Caleb in the testing lab, monitoring a prototype with several engineering students. His recovery had plateaued in recent months. He would likely always need the wheelchair and have limited dexterity in his hands. But his mind was as sharp as ever. He noticed her expression immediately. That bad? Carter's filed for patents on our technology, she said simply. He's launched a company called Neocore Systems to commercialize it. Caleb's eyes narrowed. How did he get the designs? We're not sure yet. Could be industrial espionage. Could be he's working from public filings and trying to reverse engineer. Or you have a leak, Caleb suggested quietly. The thought had occurred to Renee, but hearing it voiced aloud made her stomach clench. Project Phoenix now employed over 60 people. She knew most personally, had handpicked many, but not all. We need to focus on the legal response first, she said. Gloria thinks we'll win eventually, but it could take years. You don't have years, Caleb pointed out. The DOE contract requires delivery of working prototypes by next quarter. This lawsuit puts that in jeopardy. He was right. Project Phoenix had secured a major Department of Energy contract to develop clean energy solutions for public infrastructure. It was their biggest opportunity yet, and precisely the kind of project Carter would want to derail. The next morning, Renee received a call from Martin Hoffman at Auto Future. We've been served with similar papers, he informed her. Carter is claiming we breached our fiduciary duty by giving away valuable intellectual property. Will Auto Future stand with us? Renee asked directly. There was a slight hesitation. The board is meeting this afternoon to discuss our position. The hesitation told Renee everything she needed to know. Corporate allies were often the first to retreat when legal storms brewed. By week's end, the situation had deteriorated further. Tech publications were running stories about the plasma engine patent war, complete with Carter's carefully crafted quotes about protecting genuine innovation from opportunists. Several potential investors had postponed meetings with Project Phoenix, citing the uncertain legal situation. Worst of all, the Department of Energy had called to express concerns about the contract timeline. We can't afford delay, Renee told her core team during an emergency Saturday meeting. If we miss the DOE milestones, we lose everything we've built. We need to take this public, Kira suggested. Tell our side before Carter controls the narrative completely. Luis shook his head. A public battle plays into his hands. He's got professional PR people spinning this already. So what do we do? Asked Sarah Johnson, who had been promoted to lead technician after her success with the backup system. Renee considered their options. We fight on two fronts. The legal team handles the court battle. The rest of us focus on completing the DOE prototype ahead of schedule. We prove our value through results, not rhetoric. The strategy required round-the-clock work. Renee divided the staff into 3 shifts to ensure continuous progress. She herself barely left the facility, often sleeping on the couch in her office for a few hours before returning to the lab. 2 weeks into this grueling schedule, Neocore escalated the conflict by announcing their first public demonstration of the Neocore plasma drive at a major tech conference. The timing was clearly designed to undermine Project Phoenix's DOE presentation scheduled for the following month. "He's trying to establish first public use," Gloria explained. "It strengthens their patent position." "Can we get an injunction?" Renee asked. "We've filed, but the judge is unlikely to rule before the conference." That evening, as Renee reviewed test results in her office, she was surprised by a visit from Beth Taylor, one of their newer engineers who had joined from a major aerospace corporation 6 months earlier. "Commander Dawson," Beth said, clearly nervous. "I need to tell you something." Renee set aside her tablet. "What is it?" "Before I came here, I worked for Quantum Aerospace." She paused. "The same company where Carter was once a consultant." Renee felt a chill. "Go on." "He approached me about 3 months ago, offered me a substantial bonus to share information about Project Phoenix's designs." Beth's voice shook slightly. "I didn't do it, but I didn't tell you about it either. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me." "Why tell me now?" "Because he's contacted others on the team, at least 2 that I know of." Beth handed Renee a thumb drive. "These are the messages he sent me. The timestamps and digital signatures should help your legal case." After Beth left, Renee immediately called Gloria. The evidence of Carter's attempted corporate espionage wouldn't end the legal battle, but it could significantly strengthen their position, especially if they could prove he had successfully obtained confidential information through illegal means. The next day brought an unexpected development. A package arrived for Renee containing a thumb drive and an anonymous note. "I worked for Carter at Quantum Aerospace. You should see this." The drive contained internal emails from 7 years ago, communications between Carter and Quantum executives, discussing ways to discredit Renee after she rejected their propulsion system design. More damning were recent emails outlining his strategy for Neocore, explicitly stating his intention to leverage legal intimidation to force a settlement, regardless of the actual patent merits. Gloria was cautiously optimistic. "If we can authenticate these, they'll significantly strengthen our case. But we need to move carefully. Illegally obtained evidence can backfire." The legal team worked to verify the emails while Renee and her engineering team pushed forward with the DOE prototype. Days blurred into nights as the Neocore demonstration date approached. 2 days before the tech conference, Renee received a surprise visitor. Dr. Adam Reynolds, a former NASA colleague who had worked under her on Project Artemis. "I saw the news about Neocore," he explained after Renee welcomed him to her office. "Something didn't add up, so I did some digging." Dr. Reynolds had access to archived NASA records that had never been made public. He had discovered that Carter had been formally reprimanded during his consulting work with Quantum Aerospace for attempting to access classified Project Artemis documents without authorization. "It was buried in the security logs," Reynolds explained. "But it establishes a pattern of behavior that goes back years." Armed with this new information, Gloria filed an emergency motion with the court, seeking both an injunction against Neocore's demonstration and expedited discovery to investigate the corporate espionage allegations. The morning of the tech conference arrived with no ruling from the judge. Carter's demonstration was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 11:30 a.m., Renee received a call from Gloria. "The judge has denied our motion for an injunction," she reported grimly. "But he's granted the expedited discovery request. We can depose Carter next week." It was a partial victory, but not enough to stop the demonstration that could potentially position Neocore as the public face of plasma propulsion technology. "What do we do now?" Kira asked, as the core team gathered in Renee's office. For a moment, Renee was silent, considering their options. Then she looked up, determination hardening her features. "We go to the conference," she said. "All of us." 2 hours later, Renee walked into the crowded exhibition hall of the tech conference, flanked by Caleb, Kira, Luis, and several other key team members. They took seats near the front of the presentation area where Carter was scheduled to speak. Carter appeared right on time, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his signature camera-ready smile in place. He began with a slick video presentation about Neocore's revolutionary vision for clean energy, carefully avoiding any mention of Renee or Project Phoenix. As he unveiled the prototype engine, which did indeed bear a striking resemblance to Renee's design, he launched into a technical explanation that contained several subtle but significant inaccuracies. The plasma containment field operates on a modified Bernoulli principle, he claimed confidently, allowing for stable combustion at previously impossible temperature gradients. Renee stood up. "That's incorrect," she said clearly, her voice carrying through the suddenly silent room. "The Bernoulli principle applies to fluid dynamics, not plasma containment. What you're describing would create catastrophic field collapse under load." All eyes turned to her. Carter's smile faltered momentarily before he recovered. "Commander Dawson," he acknowledged with forced cordiality. "This is a private corporate presentation. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to save your questions for the designated Q&A period." "I'm not asking a question," Renee replied, stepping into the aisle. "I'm preventing you from misleading these people with dangerous technical inaccuracies." She gestured to the engine. "That design cannot work as you've described it. Either you don't understand the technology you're claiming to have invented, or you're deliberately misrepresenting it." A murmur ran through the audience as tech journalists began recording the confrontation. Carter's PR director tried to intervene, but Renee continued, her voice calm but authoritative, as she systematically dismantled Carter's technical claims. She didn't mention the patent dispute or the lawsuit. She simply exposed the scientific flaws in his presentation, with the precision of someone who truly understood the technology. "Would you care to demonstrate the engine's operation?" she challenged finally. "Show us this modified Bernoulli principle in action." Carter's face had grown increasingly flushed. "Our demonstration today is a technical overview, not an operational test. Full functionality will be displayed at our official launch next month." "Because it doesn't work," Renee stated simply. "Not as configured. The field harmonics are misaligned. If you attempted to initiate the reaction sequence with that configuration, you'd risk catastrophic failure." From the audience, Caleb spoke up. "As the co-developer of the original plasma containment protocols at NASA, I can confirm Commander Dawson's assessment. What we're seeing here is a superficial replica without the underlying engineering integrity." The room erupted in questions, as journalists realized they were witnessing something far more newsworthy than a standard product announcement. Carter attempted to regain control, but the damage was done. Technical reporters began asking increasingly specific questions that revealed the gaps in his understanding of the very technology he claimed to have pioneered. As security finally moved to escort Renee and her team from the hall, a voice called out from the back of the room. "I have something to add." A slender man in a Navy suit made his way to the front. He introduced himself as Dr. James Wilson, former chief engineer at Quantum Aerospace. 7 years ago, he stated clearly for the recording devices, Carter Voss attempted to access classified Project Artemis designs without authorization. When Commander Dawson's team identified critical flaws in Quantum's proposal, Mr. Voss launched a campaign to discredit her professionally. He held up a USB drive. I have the documentation to prove it, which I've already provided to the appropriate authorities. The presentation dissolved into chaos. Carter was hurried off stage by his security team as journalists swarmed Dr. Wilson and Renee for comments. Outside the exhibition hall, Renee found herself surrounded by her team, all wearing expressions ranging from shock to elation. "That was either brilliant or insane," Luis said, shaking his head in amazement. "Probably both," Caleb added with a grin. Kira was already scrolling through social media on her tablet. "It's everywhere. Tech CEO exposed by former NASA engineer is trending. The technical breakdowns of his errors are getting thousands of shares." Dr. Wilson approached their group. "Commander Dawson," he said, extending his hand, "I should have come forward years ago. I apologize for the delay." "What made you do it now?" Renee asked as they shook hands. I saw what you've built with Project Phoenix. Not just the technology, but the opportunities you're creating. Some things are worth standing up for. 3 days later, Renee sat in a courtroom as the judge issued a preliminary ruling on their case. Based on the new evidence of Carter's corporate espionage attempts and past misconduct, the court granted a temporary restraining order preventing Neocore from displaying, demonstrating, or marketing any technology based on the disputed patents. Moreover, the judge referred the matter to federal prosecutors for potential criminal investigation into corporate espionage and securities fraud. Outside the courthouse, Gloria briefed the team on next steps. This is just the beginning of the legal process, but it's a very strong start. The evidence of intentional misconduct significantly strengthens our position. What about the DOE contract? Luis asked. I spoke with their legal department this morning, Gloria replied. They're proceeding with our agreement as planned. The restraining order against Neocore actually reassured them about our intellectual property rights. As the group dispersed, Dr. Lee pulled Renee aside. You took a significant risk at that conference, she said. It could have backfired spectacularly. It was the only play we had, Renee replied. Carter understands corporate maneuvering and legal tactics, but he never understood the technology itself. That was his vulnerability. Just like at NASA, Dr. Lee noted, he wanted the prestige without doing the work. She smiled slightly. The difference is that this time you stood your ground publicly. That evening, as Renee and Caleb shared a quiet dinner at his apartment, news broke that the Securities and Exchange Commission had opened a formal investigation into Neocore Systems and Carter Voss for potential investor fraud related to the misrepresentation of proprietary technology. It's over, Caleb said, raising his glass in a toast. He can't recover from this. It's not about him, Renee replied, clinking her glass against his. It never was. 5 years passed, bringing changes, both subtle and profound. On a crisp autumn morning, Renee stood on the observation deck of the Project Phoenix campus, now expanded to cover 3 city blocks of what had once been abandoned industrial space. The original building had been joined by 2 additional facilities, an advanced research center focusing on next-generation energy systems, and an education complex that offered everything from after-school programs for neighborhood children to advanced technical training for adults transitioning to new careers. At 48, Renee had acquired a few more silver strands in her braided hair and fine lines around her eyes that deepened when she smiled. She wore them proudly, like badges earned through a life fully lived. Below, a crowd was gathering for the day's main event, the public demonstration of Phoenix Transit, a zero-emission public transportation system based on Renee's plasma propulsion technology. Leading the final preparations was Kira, now 30, who had grown into her role as Director of Applied Technologies with impressive confidence. She's come a long way, came a voice beside her. Luis had joined her on the deck, his own hair now, liberally sprinkled with gray. We all have, Renee replied. Luis had transformed as well over the years. After discovering a talent for teaching during Project Phoenix's early community workshops, he had developed a vocational training program that had become a model for similar initiatives nationwide. His classes consistently produced graduates, who were immediately hired by top engineering firms, companies that had previously overlooked such candidates. The governor just arrived, Luis noted, pointing to the commotion at the main entrance. That's good press. Are the students ready? Renee asked. Luis grinned. Nervous as hell, but ready. Having them present their contributions to the project is inspired. The students in question were graduates of Phoenix's training programs who had worked on various aspects of the transit system. Renee had insisted they be featured prominently in today's presentation, rather than relegated to the background. It's their future we're building, she said simply. They should be the ones explaining it. As they descended to join the gathering crowd, Renee's phone buzzed with a news alert. She checked it, then showed the screen to Luis. Carter Voss, sentenced to 7 years for securities fraud and corporate espionage. Luis read the headline and whistled, softly. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Let's not mention it today, Renee said. This is about looking forward, not back. The demonstration proceeded flawlessly. Kira led the technical presentation with polished expertise, while the students explained specific innovations with contagious enthusiasm. When the prototype vehicle, a sleek, silent transport pod powered by a compact plasma engine, completed its circuit around the test track, the crowd erupted in applause. Afterward, as journalists conducted interviews and officials toured the facilities, Renee slipped away to her office. On her desk sat a framed photo that hadn't been there that morning, Caleb in his NASA days, smiling broadly beside a space shuttle prototype. Beside it lay a handwritten note. "Remember where we started. Proud of where you've taken it. Love always, C." Renee touched the frame gently, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. She and Caleb had shared 6 remarkable years after his awakening, years of rebuilding, discovery, and deeper connection than they'd known even before the accident. His passing last year from a sudden aneurysm had been peaceful, but devastating nonetheless. Her grief was interrupted by a knock at the door. Dr. Lee entered, now fully retired from NASA, but still serving as a technical advisor to Project Phoenix. "Tintoise, from your admirers?" the older woman asked with a knowing smile. "Just taking a moment," Renee replied, gesturing to the photo. Dr. Lee nodded understanding. He would have loved today's demonstration. He saw the designs, Renee said. He knew it would work. The Congressional Medal of Freedom Committee called. "This morning," Dr. Lee mentioned casually. "They want to finalize the details for next month's ceremony." Renee had initially tried to decline the nation's highest civilian honor when she was notified of the selection. It had taken the combined persuasion of her entire team to convince her to accept. "Still feels wrong," she admitted. "So many people made this possible." "Which is exactly why you're the right recipient," Dr. Lee countered. "You built more than technology. You built a community that amplifies talent wherever it's found." Later that afternoon, Renee visited the elementary school, adjacent to the Phoenix campus. As part of the company's community investment, they had funded a complete renovation of the struggling school and established a science program that was now among the best in the state. In a bright classroom filled with curious faces, Kira was giving a presentation to third graders about engineering principles. She had become a regular visitor, determined to inspire the next generation of innovators. "Who can tell me what makes something move?" Kira asked the class. A small girl with braided hair like Renee's raised her hand. "Energy," she declared confidently. "That's right," Kira confirmed. "And energy comes in many forms." As Kira continued her lesson, Renee watched from the doorway, remembering the shy engineering graduate who had recognized her in the garage years ago. Now Kira was passing that same spark to children who might otherwise never consider careers in science or technology. The cycle continued. That evening, after most staff had departed, Renee sat alone in her office, working on the early chapters of her memoir. She had resisted the project for years, uncomfortable with focusing on her own story. What finally convinced her was the realization that her experiences might help others navigating similar challenges. She typed slowly, choosing her words with care. "We often speak of innovation as if it exists in a vacuum. Pure intellect divorced from human experience. But the truth is messier and more beautiful than that. Our greatest breakthroughs are shaped by our struggles, our setbacks, and most importantly, by the courage of those who refuse to be diminished by circumstance." Her writing was interrupted by a video call from an unfamiliar number. When she answered, the screen showed a classroom full of young girls in school uniforms, with Kira standing among them. "Surprise," Kira said, waving at the camera. "I'm visiting my old elementary school in Baltimore, and these future engineers had some questions for you." For the next 30 minutes, Renee answered questions about engines, space travel, and what. It felt like to stand up to someone who underestimated you. The girls listened with rapt attention, occasionally erupting in delighted laughter or serious nods of understanding. As the call ended, one small girl asked a final question. "Ms. Dawson, what should we do if someone tells us we can't do something because we're girls?" Renee considered her answer carefully. First, remember that their limitations aren't yours. Second, find people who believe in you. They're out there, I promise. And third, she smiled, prove them wrong by building something so amazing they can't ignore it. After the call, Renee stood by her office window, watching the lights of the city come on as dusk deepened into evening. Project Phoenix's illuminated logo cast a warm glow across the campus, a beacon in the growing darkness. Her phone buzzed with a text from Luis. Community Center needs final approval on the mural design. Coming to check it out? She replied affirmatively and gathered her things. As she left the building, she passed the memorial wall, which had expanded over the years to honor not only the Project Artemis team, but also Caleb and others who had contributed to Phoenix's mission. Renee paused briefly, touching Caleb's plaque. "We finished it, love," she whispered. "Just like you knew we would." Outside, the air was cool and fresh with the promise of autumn. Renee walked slowly through the campus, noting the students still working in some labs, the cleaning staff who greeted her by name, the security guards who took pride in protecting what had been built here. This was her legacy, not just the technology or the buildings, but the lives transformed and the opportunities created. A future built by those who had once been told they didn't belong. As she approached the community center where the new mural was being completed, Renee thought about the journey that had brought her here, from NASA engineer to anonymous mechanic to reluctant icon to purposeful leader. Each phase had shaped her, each challenge had strengthened her resolve. The mural, when she saw it, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. It depicted a diverse group of people building something together, something that emitted light and lifted the entire community. Above them, in simple, powerful letters, were the words from the conclusion of her memoir, which she had only shared with a few people. "They told me I couldn't do a man's job, so I built a future that made theirs obsolete." Has someone ever dismissed your greatness before you had the chance to show what you're truly capable of? Like and subscribe for more stories of hidden brilliance, unexpected redemption, and the courage to reclaim your power against all odds.